I'm Jason Judd. I'm the executive director of the Global Labor Institute at Cornell University in the School of Industrial and Labor Relations. And we're here to debate the lessons learned in the COVID pandemic. What has it wrought, and what has it taught in the global apparel trade? And in the Global Labor Institute, our chief charge is research, quantitative analysis of what's happening to work, to production, to workers in apparel and other sectors. And like all of you, we've been living and tracking the impacts of the COVID pandemic over the last 3 years. And at the Global Labor Institute, we teamed up early with the ILO, in fact, with a constellation of programs at the ILO, the Better Work program, and RESA, which is the Regional Economic and Social Analysis Unit based in Bangkok, and the Decent Work in Garment Supply Chains in Asia project. And together, our little band produced 3 papers together. The first was a briefing early in the pandemic. What's happening out there? The second paper was a longer view. Where do we think all this is headed? That paper we call by a shorthand. We call that the repeat paper. And the third paper is the one that we're gonna share with you and argue about today. The third paper is about lessons learned, and in some ways it was the easiest of the 3. Our method was very straightforward. We organized together with the ILO 4 different group conversations, one with worker organizations and labor rights organizations, one with apparel buyers, another with apparel producers, manufacturers, and one with government representatives. And we added in another 8 or 10 interviews besides, and that was the easy part, collecting all of their thinking about the impacts of COVID and the changes it's brought. The hard part was identifying the patterns and figuring out what it is these constituencies share, if anything, in their reactions to the COVID pandemic, in their lessons learned, and where they diverge. So we published the paper just a couple of months ago, and we thought it would be smart to get together a sample of the folks who contributed to the paper, who were part of these discussions. So we've organized this call to let you hear from them, and we thought we would start with the lead author on this paper, Matt Fisher-Daly, now assistant research professor at Penn State University. And then after Matt shares the findings, we'll bring in some of the voices from the paper, including Kong Atet, who is a labor leader, the president of Sikaudu, an apparel workers union in Cambodia, and Sutanto, who is director at Pan Brothers, a major apparel producer in Indonesia, Joy Roderdink, who's the head of corporate responsibility at Suit Supply in the Netherlands, and Ariana Rossi, who is the head of research and impact at Better Work in Geneva. Okay, so I've set the stage, I've introduced the players. Let me get out of the way. Matt, do you want to present the findings from the paper, and then we'll argue together about what it means?
Okay, thanks, Jason, and thanks everyone for joining today. I'm going to share some slides for this brief presentation of the overall findings, so that we can get to the discussion with the panelists. So hopefully everyone will see the screen. As Jason mentioned, this is the third of the papers. This one is titled "Learning from the Crisis: Apparel Industry Experts on Mitigating the COVID-19 Pandemic and Future Crises." So really we had we had 5 themes emerge from this discussion. And I'm going to walk through them quickly, highlighting just a couple points and some indicative quotes about each of these themes. So first, social protection systems are inadequate to respond to crises. So, this was a moment in time starting in spring of 2020 when there was unprecedented government mobilization. There was debt payment deferrals, interest rate reductions, tax relief, new credit, distribution of funds to workers at registered companies. However, there was a lot of uneven rollout of these programs. Perhaps the most successful were the vaccination campaigns. As a Manufacturers Association representative noted, quote, vaccinations were rolled out quickly because the industry was ruled essential. However, a large number of workers did not see much support. And the sentiment was shared by a trade unionist who said, quote, there is no social protection. Workers were devastated at that time. Notably, all of the participants predicted that social systems will not be ready to respond robustly to future crises, which is a concern. The second theme that emerged was that commercial terms deteriorated, which affects, of course, manufacturers and workers employed at them. As one participant noted, quote, it was absolutely true chaos at the beginning. A manufacturing manager said that a customer owed them $890,000 that he wasn't quite sure he would ever recover. And manufacturers and manufacturer association representatives all noted that manufacturers are in a position that if they bring a lawsuit or fight back in these scenarios, they are likely to lose future customers. And the overall sentiment shared by one Manufacturers Association representative is that there is a new normal indicated by shorter turnaround time, smaller orders, and that seems to be the pattern going forward. The third theme was that almost the opposite of more difficult terms of trade for manufacturers, which is that in some cases, brand and supplier relationships deepen. So this quote on the screen from one Manufacturers Association representative really captures the spectrum of experiences. They said, quote, those buyers that stepped up and worked with them, the relationship grew stronger. On the other end of the spectrum, there are suppliers for whom all the relationships were broken. Now that was the third theme. The fourth topic that emerged was that there was some indication of greater coordination across countries. And this was true among manufacturers associations. In particular, a number of associations in South and Southeast Asia have formed and begun to meet as the Sustainable Terms of Trade Initiative. They have 15 associations in 11 different countries meeting and exchanging information towards the goal of, quote, a more balanced commercial relation between a buyer and its suppliers, achieving economically, socially, and environmentally sustainable practices. Additionally, there are indications of stronger coordination between trade unions and NGOs across South and Southeast Asia and internationally. These organizations work to recoup pay for workers who lost pay and proposed an industry-wide social protection program that could, and in addition to proposing new policies, this two patterns of greater coordination among manufacturers associations and among labor may pose a path towards clearer negotiations in the industry, identifying some of the parties. And finally, the last theme to emerge was a discussion around this proposal from trade unions and labor NGOs. The Pay Your Workers, Respect Labor Rights campaign called for a global severance fund. And this call provoked debate on how to establish and strengthen social protection systems. As noted, social protection systems were glaringly lacking during the COVID pandemic in these first couple of years. And the unions and NGO representatives proposed that there would be contributions by brands and retailers and manufacturers coordinated with national governments to support national systems and governed by representatives of workers, employers, buyers. Now, the views on this proposal, of course, diverged both across constituencies, as you might expect, but also within constituencies. So, for example, among brands that participated in the focus group discussions and interviews, one brand representative noted that this might be a debate that produces some tangible outcomes and suggested that perhaps one avenue might be using existing private insurance programs. Other brand representatives balked at the proposal of brand and retailer contributions. Among manufacturers, one manufacturing manager said, quote, "It's the brands that have to take the lead to make sure that they can pay the suppliers well," end quote. Now, another representative of manufacturers, this a person at an association, said, quote, "Wouldn't that mean the employers can afford to take less care, not take responsibility, because someone will come in and clean up their mess," end quote. And among the unions and NGOs, the vast majority supported this proposal. So these were the 5 main themes. You know, Jason noted there was a prior paper which outlined 3 different avenues. One, repeating the patterns of governance and organization in the apparel sector. And another that involved some changes, but not changes in governance. And it was apparent from these focus group discussions that moving to renegotiate the governance of the apparel industry and focus on an issue like social protection faces a lot of challenges. One is that the quote, "remain cheap" doctrine, as one participant put it, remains a strong determinant in the industry. And it also appeared that there is a search for a forum where trust-based negotiations on policies might take place. And so some suggestions that came out of this discussion with the participants in the focus groups included that it would be useful to compare social protection and bargaining models towards addressing and establishing robust social protection systems. One possibility might be integrating social protection into mandatory due diligence and trade access programs. And it's clearly important that there's coordination between the international and national levels, specifically on social protection. So without any more, I'll turn it over to the panel so we can get into discussion of these findings. Thanks very much.
Okay, thanks, Matt. Okay, all right. Well, let's get started. We thought we'd go a few rounds with the panel and start with just quick reactions. So having heard what Matt has laid out, having read the paper, give us a minute and a half or 2 from each of you on your reactions to the paper. What surprised you? What would you like to elaborate? What would you like to argue with? Why don't we start? Let's start with Atat. We'll go in this order: Atat, and then Anne, and then Joy, and then Ariana. Atat.
Yes, thank you once again, Jason. I hope and you hear me very well because the connection is very bad in the last 1 month. Okay, so nice to meet you all. So I think my first impression is very good that the paper came up with very clear finding of the challenges in the poor social protection in the whole industry globally, also nationally. So this is very clear to me that helpful for the next other discussion in like with the brand and with the supplier. So it has been a lot of ignoring and get away from real debate, and so we need this kind of finding that we can push forward, and we can find the real solution for the long term. So it's even very simple that they say it's okay, nothing serious, it's like nothing really need to place in. So this is clear to the trade union and the worker that it has been very weak social protection for industry and for the worker. And the other point is it also debate on strategy, how to respond on it. We have a debate among the global union and NGO. So like now we have a pay your worker campaign, which is demanding very clear and very have a clear MOU and clear agreements that how the brand and the other stakeholder can step in, can move this thing forward with the what you call with focus, with full attention, no more what you call like break down the common strategy. So we think we need to come up with this thing, and we need to move with concrete agreement and policy. For example, we have the Rana Plaza crisis, and we come up with a course, and now we have the COVID crisis. So we always come up the solution after crisis. So we need this concrete solution, like the agreement and the proposal of the pay your worker campaign. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Good. Thank you. Thank you, Atat. Anna, you ready? 2 minutes.
Yes. Thanks, Jason and Matthew for the paper. I think the paper come up pretty good, but like what Atit has mentioned, I think prevention is needed more these days. It's not about only the disruptions due to the pandemic. I think everyone knows as well that globally the economy are converged with the geopolitics. So for that, actually open communications would need to be remain between the whole supply chain, from the brands, the retailers, up to the supply chain. And yes, having the social protection might work, but the prevention can happen actually beforehand if the transparency of the data from the consumer side up to the supply chains are really being opened. So it's not just one-sided from the supply chain side, but should be from both sides. I think that's the story, yeah, because the disruptions would happen yearly. I can feel it annually because of all this openness on social media, on geopolitics. And that's what concerned me. If people take it very lightly, that pandemic only happens like 10 years. Yes, maybe before, but with all this open communications, I think the communication among the supply chains is what being needed most, so that we have less impact on any disruptions, and basically the low-income workers can actually be protected under this transparency and social protections. That's it.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. Joy?
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Good morning. Yeah, I feel from our side, I feel COVID indeed, it really exposed more than ever before, like the power imbalances and issues within supply chains, or within, let's say, the whole ecosystem of the industry. And yeah, I feel like even till today, we're still feeling the consequences of that. And thank God there's been also some positive out of it. Mainly in the form of collaborations and working together, both within supply chain, with supply chain, with brands combined. So there's lots of good stuff to say there as well. But indeed, I think the bigger question here is, how can we make sure that this sort of stress test that it's kind of has been prepares us and makes us as an ecosystem more like, yeah, reliable and better functioning in the whole. And I feel from a brand perspective, the countries where you produce in that have better social systems have inevitably been a lot better in sort of picking up the pieces during this crisis and providing better security for workers in those systems. So they are super essential, and as brands, that's kind of out of your scope, but at the same time, it's also in your scope, because you are deciding where to produce, how those systems look like, how the relationships with your suppliers look like, and how much know-how you have in those factories and in those countries. So yeah, I feel there's a lot to learn here, and yeah, good paper.
Okay, thanks, Joy. Ariana.
Yes, thank you. And hi, everyone. I just want to also echo what the other panelists have shared. And I think another aspect that has really struck me and us as kind of co-collaborators of the team writing this paper during the process of gathering the data and analyzing it is that it really pushes us to challenge the idea that enterprises or workers' organizations or brands are homogeneous groups. There's a lot of variation in experiences and in opinions, in dynamics within each of these groups. And I think this paper is a really excellent example showing how there's no cookie cutter solution. There may be alliances that are developed across the traditional borders of these roles in the supply chain that may work in certain settings, but not in others. And this is because, again, not all suppliers are the same, not all brands are the same. And I think, and of course, every national context is highly specific and has different social protection challenges and different political challenges. And so I think it's, from a researcher perspective, it's really very enriching to read this type of complexity. From a policymaker perspective, it's more complicated, and in a way I wish it was easier, but I think it's the type of work that really adds value to the conversation and adds value to the type of solutions that we can find collectively. So I'm very happy that we were able to collaborate with the team, and yeah, look forward to discussing this more. Thank you.
Okay, good. Thank you, Ariana. Okay, so Ariana mentioned the policy dimensions and how complicated or messy it can get. So let's take that up first. The COVID pandemic has been a stress test for social protection systems, and their performance has been sort of all over the place. And one of the big issues it's taken up in the paper is okay, yes, there's agreement that social protection systems proved inadequate, and they need to be strengthened, they need to be built out, they need to be democratic, they need to be fully funded, etc. One of the big questions is who pays for this? Who pays for a fully funded an adequate social protection system? And we got lots of different opinions on that. Matt previewed some of them. So let's get panel reactions to that question. Who pays for social protection systems? No order this time. Anybody who's ready.
I can jump in if you want.
Yeah, you go, Ariana.
Okay, great. Yeah, I mean, that's a bit like the $1 million question or more, actually, as it is
Yeah.
for sure more
$1 trillion
expensive than
question.
that. Yes. But yeah, I think it's really one of the key questions that have been also very much brought to the fore during the pandemic. As I mean, of course, traditionally, we've seen that the space for social protection systems, even in countries that are under a lot of stress, economic stress, has been expanded during COVID, whether it is sectorally or really at the national level. But it's clear that the under-resource to these systems it's just in the eyes of everyone. And so while normally we would think that domestic resources are what is needed to support an expansion of universal social protection, be it through government expenditures or employer and worker contributions through their contributions, or even general populations through paying VAT, so just like the tax system that can fund such systems. In these moments of crisis, that is where international assistance, be it development aid or support from international financial institutions such as the World Bank or the IMF, or support from brands, as it has happened during the pandemic, come in to kind of step in a moment of resource shortages. And the paper is very helpful in identifying specific cases in which this additional infrastructure of multilateral aid and support has come in handy. But I think it's also clear that this type of intervention cannot be really a long-term solution. It's something that can be part of an ecosystem that helps the setup of a social protection system at the national level that needs to be sustainable on its own. So this is not something that can be part of the design of a social protection system in the long run, but rather something that comes and supplements at a specific moment in time for perhaps a time-bound period to help overcome specific challenges. And yeah, I mean, I think it's also a question of governance of social security systems, social protection systems, and making sure that there's sufficient infrastructure to maximize efficiency. So, I mean, as in many public administration functions, there's often more transparency needed, more disclosure needed in terms of like the steps that are taking place in providing aid. So there's just more room to improve in terms of even increasing efficiency of existing systems and not necessarily building new ones or paying for new ones. Yes, I will stop here for now. Thank you.
Okay, good. Pam?
Okay, Jason. So let me try to refresh what happened during the pandemic, right? Especially the first year, which is 2020, right? At that time, actually, everyone is quite confused with what happened, not just the suppliers, the brands, the retailers, all, as well as our workers. A lot of lockdown and so on, right? In Indonesia, thankfully, that we don't have lockdown in the industry, but yet, there's a lot of cancellations, there's a lot of pending orders, but then the cash flow for the industry needs to move on because we have to pay our workers, we have to pay our suppliers, so for the banks and so on and so on. The issues right now, actually, the whole stakeholders, right? Who's going to pay the social protection? Actually, every country has their own formula for the health, for the pension fund, for the lose of jobs. Right now, because of what happened in the pandemic in Indonesia, right now they try to, the government try to accommodate social protections there. However, our thinking is in the supply chain. This is not only about how the workers going to move on from laying out jobs or out of jobs or even at home. But what about the future, right? That's in the labor part. How about in the supply chain? If there is a cancellations, if, for example, we already buy the fabrics and then there's cancellation pendings, all the funding costs are there. So who's going to handle that? I think the issues is more bleak if it's not being handled properly among the supply chain in the whole ecosystem, because it's not only about the labor. So actually to make sure that this garment industry is not just a sunset, but also a sunrise industry still, despite all the disruption in the world. So that's it. There's no real solution, but there's ongoing solutions that if everyone has the open mindset on the whole stakeholders, I think this can be discussed balanced, where we actually can cut down all the waste, we can cut down all the inventories and focus more on the smoothness of the supply chain. That's my thought as a manufacturer, right? Because
Okay.
it's not only about the labor, but it's about how to sustain the industry with the promising prospect career out of this supply chain. There's so much disruption and we cannot handle this. Who's going to continue producing clothes for the world, if not us, the workers as well as the manufacturer, right?
Okay, we'll come back to that at the end, and we want to talk about sort of what's changed in recent months. Who else wants to take a shot at this question? Who pays for social protection systems?
Yeah, maybe
Okay.
I had a small contribution. So yeah, so I like the word ecosystem, because that sentence or statement was what you call inclusive creation of anything, so but the mindset is also very important. It's like, is it the question on 100% profit business, or like the question of creating an ecosystem? Because at the moment I experience here at the ground, like, so very much still 80%. I wouldn't say 90 to 100%, but it is 80% profit driven, so it's just my ground practice. And at the international level, it's a bit nicer, you talk about ecosystem, how to create industrial relation and all those stuff. So it is very how to say, not connecting between the definition like ecosystem and create a stronger sustainable industry and social protection, social dialogue, and all those things. It's not really practicing at the ground. So to me, it's simple, because I don't know, because from the workers perspective, it's simple, because one piece of cloth was created by employer and workers. So very easy that we can like the pay your worker campaign also showing that, right, the document, right, the document on that. So how do we prevent the future? For me, I listen to a lot of challenges of the supplier toward the brand. The brand say good, but do something which is not good. Short order, and a lot of condition, a lot of quality control, a lot of all those things. So and when we call for ecosystem to pay, the supplier afraid to join, because they say, even the association in Cambodia, they say if the brand pay just 1 cent more, they will have to give all those 1 cent more to worker. They're willing to have those things. So that is an issue. To me, it has to work together, and it has to come out from the product of this industry, the benefit or the thing from this industry. So if we can make the ecosystem work, so then I would say it's not so complicated. But if everybody try to distract, what is mine, what is yours, so then I don't think, because I've been here for 20 years, so like, let me put in a bit arrogant or exaggerate. I sacrifice a lot. I try to talk to employer, try to build relationship, or that person say, oh, it's not good, all those things, not come in the one package yet. So we need to put everything in one package and then try to create ecosystem. That's what it is, Yeah.
Okay, good. Joy or Matt, want to get in?
I'll just add something very briefly. Yeah, I definitely echo what my fellow panelists have said. I think from a brand's perspective, we can only indirectly influence the social protection systems in production countries, but that's at the same time doesn't mean that that there is no role for us. And I feel like one of the simpler or more just things that we should be doing is kind of really boils down to purchasing practices and making sure that those are fair and inclusive, and that those purchasing practices actually support suppliers and therefore also support workers. And I think it's more than just placing orders and canceling orders. I think it should go a lot further than that. We should be talking about multi-year contracts, about like decent payment terms that are fair for both parties, and really try to build more towards like partnerships, rather than seeing supply chain partners as like an extraction channel where you get your product from. And I think COVID has also learned us that lesson, because the moment that you disregard suppliers or supply chains during moments of crises, inevitably there will be a turning point, and you will not be able to start back up again and really move forward as well. And I feel that's one of the main lessons that at least we as a brand learned, is that indeed it is an ecosystem. I also echo that we're all part of this, and you will need all players for it to function, both in bad times and also definitely in the good times. So yeah, that's definitely part of it.
Okay, good. Matt, anything?
Sure. Very quickly, I would just underscore the point that Joy made about the importance of purchasing practices, because as an industry, part of the challenge is distribution of the value that's created. And if there's not sufficient value being retained in country at the factory level, then there's not going to be sufficient to be distributed to workers to have wages that cover costs of living and such. So that's one issue. And the other, to pick up a bit on what Atit was discussing, that and others mentioned as well, this has to be a negotiated process. There's a lot of variation in the particular conditions on the ground, and yet there are a strong areas of coordination in the different groups. And so negotiating an industry-wide approach to this issue would be really the ideal.
Okay, good. I had a quick follow-up. This is for Joy and Anne. I wonder, we know with the ILO, for example, that member states, governments are making new requests for help, for technical support on social protection questions. But I wonder, Joy, when Suit Supply is looking at a new country, when you're making a sort of macro sourcing choice, or you're looking at individual factories, where the quality, the seriousness of the social protection system in that country falls on your list, and how you track an individual supplier's commitment to the system as it exists, or to building one that's stronger. Is that in the calculus? And do you get these sorts of questions from buyers now about social protection systems in Indonesia?
Well, I feel the first answer to your question is, do we incorporate this in sourcing decisions? And the honest answer to that is we don't do that enough. At the same time, COVID has really taught us that the way our sourcing is set up, the way the countries where we produce, the relationships that we have with suppliers, have been pivotal in survival of not only us but also our partners there. So in that way, I feel this definitely is an eye opener, because everyone kind of knows, in a high level, like, of course, social protection systems are important, et cetera, et cetera. But it has made a tremendous difference in our own responses and the way we could support ourselves and also our suppliers. So yeah, it's for sure very, very essential, and even more so. And I feel COVID in that way has been a huge mirror to those things.
Okay, Anne?
Yes, thanks, Jason. Thanks, Joy. So in reality, unfortunately, no buyers actually ask us that questions. However, Pan Brothers, as the largest garment in Indonesia, we do care about these issues because of two things. One of it is because as an Indonesian's labor-intensive industry, we have to give kind of sorts of pioneership as well as role of model on how the garment industry actually should really support this risk issue. It's called risk management in our part, right? So we advocate the government how we should be able to conduct this in the future, because in Indonesia, we are a democracy country right here. However, there's still a lot of unemployment. There's still a lot of issues on several sectors, and we want the unemployed world to see this sector as still a sexy sector for them for their career. So the risk management of losing the job in our industry should be advocating in a way where the issues of disruption could be handled in social protections. That's the way we do things within the government. And I have to say, I really respect our government during this pandemic. The advocating of the industry not to have a close down or lockdown actually diminish the issue of social protection, because everyone still have the jobs. Everyone can still put up the orders on hand. Because frankly speaking, if there is a lockdown, I don't know how we can handle these issues of dormant wages, where the industry still have to pay, and yet we don't have the income. But the reason why we in Indonesia can actually advocate this well, because the government listen, and we have a lot of good associations and chamber of commerce that really advocate how the industry should move on, right? So it's not only about the social protection, right? It's also about prevention of not being able to do business while we can still handle the health issues with regards to pandemic, for example.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Thanks, Anne. Okay, so I want to go one more quick round with the panel, and then we'll take questions from the floor. If you put a question in the Q&A, we'll try to get to it. I see one or two in there from Jeff Hermanson. So we'll do that next. Start pumping your questions into the Q&A. But here's a question for the panel. Try to give this just a minute each. We did conversations for this paper are how many months old now, man? 8, 9 months. They're a little past the sell-by date. I wonder what has changed for each of you, for worker organizations, for manufacturers, policymakers, buyers. What has changed for you in the last 6, 8 months? Has the industry taken a turn? And if so, how does it look? How does it feel from where you are? Who's first?
I can go first.
All right,
Jason.
Anne, go ahead.
Okay, so I think the pandemic makes us very close with our workers and our government, and the success story of how Indonesia can actually turn around during the pandemic, actually give a lot of confidence to a lot of workforce as well as the industry. However, precautions should be done, especially during this 2023, where another global disruptions is happening due to, this Ukrainian Russia war that really actually lowered down the buying power of everyone due to the energy crisis, right? So I think in the future, what make it different? In the past, we always think, oh, this is a pandemic, but I know for a fact that we need to have a precaution measures or risk management measures where any disruption should be handled with more calm and more openness among the whole stakeholders and ecosystem. And the transparency communication is what we needed from each one of us within the sectors, from the workers to us to the brands or retailers. I think that's it. Disruption happens every time, anytime, due to any reasons, not just pandemic.
Okay, good. Anyone else? Joy, Ariana, what's changed? Or here's a variation on the question: how optimistic are you about the next crisis? Anne has talked about it, not a multi-crisis, but a serial crisis. How are you feeling about what's coming?
I mean, I'm mixed there. I feel I'm positive in a lot of ways. Something that Anne already said as well. I feel like there's the relationships that have festered within the different players within the industry have for sure everyone has become closer, and I feel open dialogue has become more regular, and it's not just a case of a nice to have, but a need to have for survival. So I feel everyone's a lot more open to each other, a lot more honest. There's a lot more transparency as well there, and I feel that was kind of overdue for a very long time. And I'm glad that at least some of those steps in some of those places have been made and have been said. I think from our perspective, I feel you can have an amazing program, you can have over the whole good purchasing practices, good relationships, but at the same time, your weakest supplier, your weakest link, the one that you might not pay as much attention to as to the others, is kind of the Achilles heel of your program, of your business, and of the quality of your social sustainability. So in that way, it has to be attention has to be overall, and yeah, I think we all need to make sure that we support and give enough attention and have enough understanding of where money flows in supply chains, how suppliers are doing, and yeah, making sure that also pricing that are given to us or pricing that we give to them is transparent, understand the labor component in pricing. And I feel over the whole, what's become more evident are things that we've kind of known for a while already that were very important. But yeah, this crisis has for sure shown us that those things are important. So it is a nice opportunity for us all to really invest more in those things. At the same time, I also feel that in some kind of ways, sometimes it is kind of going back to business as usual, and I think there, that might be a weakness going forward. Yeah.
Maybe that's paper number 4. Atet?
Yeah, just quick thing. So for me, yeah, I agree. There is some government and some country take this opportunity, and some also very hesitate to change. So the braveness of this decision of the private sectors and the government to respond to this for the future sustainability. So I think one more thing that very clear to us is a product of solution and the prevention. So we can see, we have so many talks, so many actions, so many workshop and conference, but don't have any product, don't have any thing came out of it. So so just like just like the talk with very unclarity and no outcome of it. So we for me as the worker, as the ground, so we prefer the, okay, we take care of the root, and we prefer the fruit. So if no fruit, so we do not to watering the the tree forever, so we have to see something which is more practical and more result based. So for us is welcome the dialogue and agree that would be good, but if there is no result, so it's still a talk. So for me, this is a very, very important for people at the ground.
Yeah. Just one quick thought. I was talking about the fruit of all these conversations, and we've talked about ecosystems. There's something about the use of the term ecosystem that's bugging me. Ecosystems, for me, I'm not a scientist. They connote systems that grow together naturally, and they're very complex, and they're a little hard to disaggregate. The role of the different players in an ecosystem seems inherently messy and complex. And I think when we're trying to answer a question like who pays for social protection, for example, the roles have to be a lot clearer. Maybe ecosystem is too soft focus for this question. Okay. Sorry, just a little editorializing there. I see the questions are stacking up. So let's pull a couple of questions from Q&A. We've got a handful of minutes left, and we'll get reactions from our panelists. One is one sort of a big picture question from Jeff Hermanson. He says, brand profits in general are massive even in times of crisis. Are we seeing a draining of wealth or value from the global south, where the production happens, to the global north, where most of the major brands and buyers reside? I guess just let me add a little to this question. We saw in the financial crisis here in the United States and its aftermath an acceleration of the shifting of wealth, income, and wealth towards those who have the most. Is this happening in apparel? Is it happening in a way that's different or faster than it is in the rest of the global economy? Any thoughts on that? The global South-North tension and the flow of wealth and value?
I'll go first.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree with this question to the extent that it is undoubtedly true that the moment that there is a crisis, what's happening in the global north has a huge negative impact in generalizing on the global south. That is inevitably true. At the same time, I wouldn't say that a lot of apparel brands are making gigantic profits right now. I think also during COVID, and still there's quite a lot of furloughs, quite a lot of brands are actually going bankrupt. So in that kind of way, I feel we as a whole industry are also sort of underestimating the vulnerability of even brands and sort of global international businesses that are sort of at the top of the chain, let's say, as well. So I don't really see the crazy profits, for example, that gigantic oil companies are making across the board, while we all struggle to pay our energy bills. So yeah. I do feel that there is some difference, but at the same time, yeah, there is definitely some truth in there. But yeah, also again, referring to the word ecosystem, Jason, yeah, I agree with you. It is kind of vague and messy and very difficult to sort of point out who's responsible for what. And I think actually, therefore, it might be a good word, because I think the reason why we're still having these panels and having these discussions on these things is indeed that the rules are not necessarily always clear, and that it's an effort that has so many impacts on so many different players within the field. Yeah. So yeah,
okay.
And this
yeah,
is
it also connotes
sort
of self-regulating. If left to itself, the system will balance. It'll work in the end. Anne, do you want to jump in on this question about North and South?
Yeah, I do agree with what Joy has mentioned, right? For example, during the pandemic, the one that really make huge profit is actually shipping lines. If you look at all the numbers, the huge amount of containers fee or containers, usually from Indonesia, for example, to the US, we pay 40 feet, 4,000. The brands or the retailers have to pay 20,000. It doesn't make sense. And if you look at the financial statement of all the shipping lines, they make huge profit, right? And if you remember what happened, the backlog in what do you call it? In each of the ports, that makes a lot of costs, right? A lot of inflations in the making. So there's no clear things, but there's always opportunists within the crisis. And unfortunately, it's happened from time to time. But to be fair, I agree with Joy in a way that there's also a lot of brands, retailers suffering and having Chapter 11. That actually also burden the suppliers because of payments being delayed or even not being paid, a discount and so on and so on. So that's actually very sad. And well, the shipping lines make all the huge profits of the world.
Okay.
But this is the
Well,
world, right? This is the world, fortunately and unfortunately. And
we're going to bring
the
Costco and
human,
Maersk into the next paper.
we, the human, need to humanize all of this, right? And make sense.
Yeah. Okay, good. Ariana or Atat? Any reactions on that question? Go ahead.
Yeah, no, very briefly. I think this is very interesting, and I think it just reminds me of your second paper that was about the different scenarios. And I wonder, there was a scenario that I think you called Regain that had to do with, in a way, linking back to my earlier comments, like unpacking the complexity of these supply chains. It's not that there is only one or one type of brand or one type of supplier, and the way in which they weather crisis or they deal with their supply chain relationship can be radically different. And in that scenario, I think you had highlighted how there may be a bifurcation of paths, and there is maybe a path where the more progressive and advanced, let's say, brands are able to identify the gains that come from having a more sustainable supply chain and are willing to embark in that process and have higher margins pushed down to suppliers, et cetera, et cetera. But there's also a vast range of other types of supplier relationship that are perhaps more murky, less exposed to media pressure, less exposed to legislation. I see there's a comment on that in the question and answer list. And they are perhaps even worse off as a result of this type of disruptions like the pandemic and like the cost of living crisis we're experiencing now. And so to think about the policy solutions not just as one, there's only one road that this can go, I think is really always important to remind ourselves and to be nimble enough to think like there may be different ways in which a certain regulation or a certain strategy can apply to different actors.
Yeah, good. Atat, last word.
Oh, okay. So yeah, I think the key from my experience so I will stick to the negotiation part, so I mean, who earn more profit, brand or suppliers. And so my point is, if we have the, like for example, Cornell's or other researcher thing who came up with something like more potential, let's say it's not concluded, it is an excellent document. So the question is, will everybody in the ecosystem willing to take down one step and build the future, build a more long-term future sustainability? If people keep stick to their profit and I mean, profit, yes, but to contribute to build a stronger ecosystem and partnerships and sustainability So that would the excellent way forward. If if we will willing to do that. If if we don't, so then I don't think how can we really synchronize and build this future system. So that from my experience.
Okay, good. We've got more questions in the chat, but we're at our limit here. I'm sorry about that. That's my mismanagement. But I want to. It's early for some of you. It's very late for others. I want to thank all the panelists for joining us, joining the conversations that made the paper, and again today. In particular, I want to thank Ariana, and I want to thank David and Christian at the ILO. They were with us through these 3 papers. And thanks to Isa, who is part of the Global Labor Institute, for putting today's call together. And I saw in the early going among the attendees, Lowell Jackson, who was here at the Global Labor Institute, then the New Conversations Project, when those first 2 papers were pumped out. Pumped out's the wrong term. Okay. Great. Well, thank you again. Thanks to the attendees. We've recorded this, and I think we'll be putting it up so you can enjoy it again and again. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone. Yeah,
Thank
bye-bye.
you, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.